Bitcoin by far, and then some Ethereum and some Doge. I might pump, but I don't dump.
There's a massive event for Bitcoin. Some of the most well-known, influential, and powerful Bitcoin investors talked about events and topics that are driving the market right now. People like Elon Musk, the CEO and founder of Tesla, and Cathie Wood, who's the CEO of ARK Invest, and you had Jack Dorsey on the panel. He's the billionaire CEO and founder of Twitter.com, and he's actually started a few companies that are specifically designed to help Bitcoin grow. For those of you that missed the talk, you weren't able to tune in live, don't worry, I have the most important clips and takeaways that I'm right about to play for you. And also after that, I will show you how the market is responding. Bitcoin actually popped. We got below 30K yesterday and people thought we were going to 24, 20K. Now we had a nice 5-6% pop. We're back up in the 31K region. So I'm going to show you how the market was responding because there were some buys coming in as Elon was talking about Bitcoin. That's all coming up next in the show. Hope you guys enjoy. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. Every single week, I bring you hedge funds, VCs, analysts, traders, investors to see what they think about the crypto market. Also some market updates. And if you enjoy this video and you learned anything at all, hit the like button. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Now let's dive in and look at the key moments on what they had to say about Bitcoin.
One way out from here, and that's up.
They kicked off the discussion by asking Elon and Cathie and Jack what brought them into Bitcoin, what keeps them interested, and why do they think this is such a big idea, where people should be investing, where money's going to flow. And Jack Dorsey's answer, I think, was the most powerful. Here's what he had to say.
It's deeply principled. It's weird as hell. It's always evolving, and it just reminded me of the internet when I was a kid. When I saw Bitcoin in 2009, you see a chance to replace the whole foundation. And everything that Elon was talking about in terms of ACH and the credit card networks were built with very different agendas in a very different time frame, and it's crazy that they still exist. And they have scaled, but they just are not relevant to today, and they're certainly not relevant to the future, especially when you consider the entire world and countries like Nigeria or Ghana or India, and its interconnection with countries like the United States and Canada and all over Europe. So what really drove my thinking and drives my passion around it is, like, if the internet gets a chance to get a native currency, what will that be? And to me, it's Bitcoin because of those principles, because of that creation story, because of its resilience, because of the number of tests it's been. But what inspires me the most is just the community driving it.
The reason I like Jack bringing that up so much is when he says Bitcoin has the potential to be the internet's native currency. I think a lot of times you think where you're from in the world. So if you're from the United States, you might not think about how hard it is to run a business in Africa or India and have parts of your company communicate and send wires and send transactions to people all over the world. That's a tough thing to do. And sometimes you have to get licenses, all these certifications you have to get to operate in different parts of the world. But for companies, as humans and companies continue to operate in a more digital world, online all the time, right? You need a currency that's going to be able to work everywhere. There isn't one government or one regulating body that could force some rule on you that doesn't let you operate there. And that's what makes Bitcoin so powerful. So I liked how he kicked things off. Now next, we're going to look at Cathie Wood, and she gives the case for why investors find Bitcoin so interesting. I'm going to play that for you right now.
First rules-based monetary system, global, ever. This is a very big idea. This idea that purchasing power will go up over time if demand rises relative to supply. Supply ultimately fixed at 21 million units. That's a very good thing. Purchasing power going up globally around the world. And this idea that it's a hedge against confiscation of wealth.
The phrase store of value gets thrown around a ton, especially if you focus on Bitcoin a lot, right? If you're investing in Bitcoin or you've heard about it, you've probably heard someone say it's a store of value. Now, the critics will refute that and say it can't be a store of value. It's too volatile. It dropped 50% in the past couple of months. That didn't store my value. But if you shift your time frame, instead of thinking in 6 month periods and start thinking 1, 5, 10 years, it's done an incredible job of storing value. And if you start thinking 20, 50, 100 years, the amount of time that someone needs to invest in their lifetime, or how corporations invest, or how pensions and governments allocate their resources, they're not thinking about 6 months. They're thinking about 5 to 10 years down the road. And central banks around the world are conducting the biggest monetary experiment ever by continually printing money. And the solution, in a lot of ways, is having a hard-capped money supply. Cathie explained it perfectly. If demand for something where the supply cannot increase is going up relative to that stable supply, well, that purchasing power is going to increase if you're holding Bitcoin. And I just wanted to highlight it because I hear so many counter arguments for why Bitcoin isn't a store of value. And I think Cathie Wood did a really good job of making it pretty clear to people. So after that, this is where the talk starts to get a little more entertaining and maybe a little bit less educational. Elon Musk starts talking about the assets that he owns, not just Bitcoin. Obviously, he loves Dogecoin. He talks about ETH and Doge.
But apart from that, I do own Bitcoin, and Tesla owns Bitcoin, SpaceX owns Bitcoin, and then I do personally own a bit of Ethereum and Dogecoin, of course.
Kind of love that little grin he throws on when he says he personally owns some Dogecoin. Now, there's a big distinction to make here. Tesla and SpaceX own Bitcoin, right? The companies own that in their corporate treasury. A company has to vote on, what they're investing in, whether or not it's right for the company, whether it's positive for shareholders. So Bitcoin is obviously their choice there. But personally, outside of that, he owns Ethereum and Doge too. And that's always been a question. Does Elon actually own Dogecoin? He expands on it a little more here.
But the three things I own outside of SpaceX and Tesla, but of any significance, are Bitcoin by far, and then some Ethereum and some Doge. So if the price of Bitcoin goes down, I lose money. I'm not sort of, I might pump, but I don't dump. I definitely do not believe in getting the price high and selling or anything like that. And I would like to see Bitcoin succeed. I think there's some merit to, this is not a slam on Bitcoin, there's some merit to consider something that has a higher max transaction rate and a lower transaction cost, and kind of seeing how far you could take a single layer network.
That has to be one of the all-time sound bites for crypto and Bitcoin. Elon Musk, the richest man on earth, who's been a big Bitcoin proponent, then got in some trouble when he said, Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, potentially a catalyst for Bitcoin's downside. Him coming out and saying, I might pump, but I won't dump. The important takeaway there is he does want to see Bitcoin succeed, and he clarifies the reason for owning Ethereum and Doge. The merit or the reason he likes those is potentially there's some merit to owning things that have higher transaction throughput and lower transaction cost. Now, Bitcoin might be able to achieve those with things like Lightning Network, but I can understand that, right? I think that's a rational view to have. He holds the most of Bitcoin and then owns some Doge and ETH because of those two reasons. So I think it's good that he finally clarified that, and not that he thinks Doge is going to take Bitcoin, because they're trying to do two very, very different things. One's a joke currency. Yes, it's very cheap to transact. The other one has a very viable chance of being the internet native currency and being this store of value for millions of people around the world. Dogecoin might do that. I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm glad he clarified that. A lot of people were trading on Elon Musk saying that and wanted to understand why he owned Doge. He finally came out and gave his reason. The next topic they talked about is something that's pressing. This is affecting the market right now, and some would argue caused a lot of the sell-off. It's the narrative that Bitcoin mining is bad. It was shared on New York Times, CNBC, Bloomberg. Every single journalist on Twitter every day was publishing that Bitcoin mining is destroying the planet. And it's a tough concept to wrap your head around, especially if you don't see the reason for Bitcoin existing. You're always going to say the energy usage of Bitcoin is bad, right? That's the clear conclusion they come to if they don't understand Bitcoin. Now, the reason it's so important to fix that narrative and understand, is the energy being used renewable? Is it actually helping the planet by reducing pollution? The reason it's so important to make that point clear is because of how much money's waiting on the sidelines to invest in things that are ESG friendly. Cathie explains.
And there is a massive movement afoot in the institutional world, especially, to embrace ESG and make sure that their asset managers are doing the same.
So it's not just about proving the critics wrong and saying Bitcoin mining isn't bad. There's a clear effect. If the narrative does change, and as Bitcoin continues to use more renewables, there is a lot of sideline money that would be able to invest in Bitcoin on an ESG-friendly basis. And Elon expanded on this because he was one of those people that said Bitcoin mining isn't good for the environment. Maybe we can't support that. Here's what he had to say.
As long as there is a conscious and determined and real effort by the mining community to move towards renewables, then obviously Tesla can support that.
I really do believe that Bitcoin will be much more environmentally friendly, certainly than traditional gold mining or the traditional financial services sector. In many ways, it already is.
So we got a 2-for-1 there, two positives. Not only does Elon come out and say Tesla will be able to support Bitcoin if it continues to work towards renewables, which it is doing, but you also have Cathie Wood highlighting that you can't just look at Bitcoin mining by itself, siloed off. You have to compare it to what the traditional banking system uses. And I don't think we're going to change anyone's minds today that still thinks Bitcoin mining is bad for the environment, but it's good to see prominent investors at least start to tackle that narrative that Bitcoin just can't escape from. Next time you see a Bitcoin mining is bad article, maybe take a look at the ARK Invest research and start to look at the hard numbers of how much energy is renewable, because Bitcoin is trending in that direction. It's positive to see them talking about that. I'm going to play one more clip for you guys. It was the last question of the panel, and they were each asked what their hope is for Bitcoin and their outlook. And this is important. So Elon gives something, Cathie gives something, and Jack gives something really powerful at the end. Right after I show you guys the clip, I'm also going to walk through the Bitcoin chart and how we're trading, because we're putting in 2 positive days. The first time it's happened in a long time. Bitcoin's able to recover 30K. I don't know. Maybe the narratives are changing investor and traders' minds a little bit quicker than I thought they would. But we'll take a look at the chart after this. This is each of their hope for Bitcoin.
Well, my hope for, I guess, crypto in general is that it can improve the efficiency of the information system that we call money, basically a better standard of living and more power to the individual, which I very much agree with.
Think about the internet in the earliest days. We couldn't imagine what was going to happen, but the impetus to growth was pretty incredible. So change the world in ways that we cannot imagine right now, solving even more problems, but creating more opportunities as well, which is the history of technology and disruptive innovation.
My hope is that it creates world peace or helps create world peace. I mean, Elon said it earlier, like we have all these monopolies of violence and the individual doesn't have power. And the amount of cost and distraction that comes from our monetary system today is real. And it takes away attention from the bigger problem. It may sound a little bit ridiculous, but like you fix that foundational level and everything above it improves in such a dramatic way. So it's going to be long term, but my hope is definitely peace.
I did my best to trim down that hour 30 discussion and bring you guys the most important takeaways, at least what I thought was the most important. I'm sure there's probably some clips that I missed, but I do hope you found this video valuable. If you missed that talk, you at least got the key takeaways. Now let's look at the Bitcoin chart, because things are actually shaping up and looking a little more bullish than they have in recent weeks. Bitcoin has basically been stuck in a range between 30K. You can think about that as the lowest point we got after the sell-off in May, right? We've dropped 50% from the highs at 60K, get down to 30K. That's the low of that range. And then for the next 2 months, basically, where we are currently, Bitcoin has been capped in between 30 and 40K. So we've been bouncing back and forth several times. Over the past 14 days, though, price really started to kind of drip down lower. For the first time in nearly 2 months, Bitcoin actually started to sell off and get below the range. And it spent about, 12 or 24 hours there intraday. Price got below the 30K region, was sitting right around 29.5, 29.2. That was the lowest it got. And as we started to break that range, I mean, you could see it. If you were on Twitter or if you were checking CNBC, people started talking about Bitcoin is ready to crash down to 20K, down to 24K. Right? Whenever price sits in a range, a breakout of that range, whether it's to the upside or to the downside, is usually indicating that price may be ready to actually break out and trend again. So when it's a break to the downside, obviously it had people worried, I think for good reason. After that talk, I don't know if it was the talk that caused it. Maybe it's just this buyer that's been around at below 30K for the past 2 months. It seems he's going to buy anything below 30K. I'm not sure how long that holds. But at least in the short term and this week, the reason why people are a little bit more excited today is we were able to recover this 30K zone, right? So we broke below the range briefly for less than a day, and immediately thereafter, price pops back up, and then you have the rest of the crypto market also popping up. Alts are going to act like a higher beta Bitcoin play. The rest of the market is going to follow Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin actually does break down, let's say something like that happens this week. I hope it doesn't. I don't think it will. But let's say Bitcoin actually does trend down to 24, 20K. Well, alts would probably get hit really hard too, because then the potential for a longer bear market is far more likely. And altcoins obviously get hurt in that scenario. Whenever Bitcoin can recover the range, even though it's not very positive yet, right? We're not above 40. We're still stuck in this exact same price range you've been in. But since it was at least able to hold that range, it's a positive sign, and the rest of the alt market can bounce back just on the increased likelihood that there's a chance Bitcoin actually trends back up to 40K. So there was a lot of trading happening when Elon and them were talking. I think that's the initial pump is right when that conference kicked off. I'm not sure that just Elon and Jack and Cathie talking about their vision for Bitcoin is the type of thing that brings us higher. You do need real volume. You do need real retail interest, right? You have to have a ton of people believing that this market's actually ready to trend up. We're not there yet, but it is a positive sign. It's breathed some life back into the market. And as I said when I started this video, we're not going to change everyone's mind in a day. But it is very positive. I think what they did a really good job with at this B-Word conference and this B-Word event, their initiative was to fight some of the news and the headlines and the narratives that you're constantly seeing as clickbait on CNBC, Bloomberg, New York Times, that only paints Bitcoin in a bad light. And it's really important to kind of look at the positive developments happening there as well. That's going to take some time, though. Narratives happen first, momentum and price will happen later, and these two green candles are at least a sign of hope for a lot of Bitcoin investors. But for me personally, on a trading perspective, as long as we're in this range, I just don't find trading Bitcoin too interesting. I think a break above 40K, a significant break, would be positive. I view that as very bullish, breaking out of this range. Obviously, what we had at the beginning of the week, a break below 29K would be viewed as quite bearish and would expect 24 to 20K. So in between 30 and 40, don't get your hopes up. It's going to be back and forth action. Above 40K, that's bullish. Below 30K, that's bearish. And bulls, at least, were able to save the day. And it lined up perfectly with this conference going live. And that's all I got for today's episode of the Profit Maximalist Show. If you missed the conference, you're caught up. You got to see what Elon said. He does own some Dogecoin personally. No, he doesn't think it's challenging Bitcoin at all in that regards. I think that's an important concept. I think Jack had some really powerful words about Bitcoin becoming the internet's native currency. It's a really big idea, and we get so caught up in price that you kind of forget what we're all doing here and what we're all supporting here. And then you have Cathie talking about inflation, deflation, how Bitcoin helps investors fight against that, a hedge against what central banks are doing around the world. Hope you guys found that valuable. Gave you a chart update as well. Keep you in tune with what's happening. I have more episodes coming out later this week. I'm interviewing a guest I've had in the show before. He made north of $20 million last year trading Bitcoin and stocks. I'm getting his take because he was bearish. He just flipped back bullish. I want to see what he sees in the market, pass that perspective along to you guys, and interviews coming out all next week. Market updates, it's all going down right here on the channel. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. Hit the like button if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.